How's my light, Angie?
You're good. You're both good. Okay.
How's my light, Angie?
You're good. You're both good. All right, guys. Let me press record. We're going to give everyone a few minutes to tune in. But welcome, everybody. This is Roberto Carlos Garcia in conversation with Claudio Cabrera. My name is Angie, and I'm the founder and creative director of Dominican Writers. And tonight's conversation is basically, we're kind of doing a launch of your book via Dominican Writers, right? Of Elegies, of your most recent collection of poetry. And Claudio here is going to be our host for tonight and not myself. So I will be disappearing from this video in a few minutes. But for those of you who do not know who Roberto Carlos Garcia is, he is a poet, a storyteller, an essayist, a self-described sancocho of provisions from the Harlem Renaissance, the Spanish poets of 1929, the Black Arts Movement, the Nuyorican School, and the Modernists. Garcia is rigorously integrative. That didn't come out right. Of himself and the world around him, conveying nakedness of emotion, intent, and experience. And he writes intensively about the Afro-Latins and Afro-diasporic experience. His second poetry collection, Black Maybe, an Afro-lyric, is available from Willow's Books. And his first collection, Melancolia, is available from Cervania Barba Press. Claudio Cabrera is a CEO search engine. You're a CEO search engine optimization.
SEO.
I totally ruined that, Claudio.
I wish I was a CEO.
He's part of that team at the New York Times. But Claudio is, most of you probably know Claudio because he speaks a lot about identity and Afro-Latinidad, colorism, Negritude on his Instagram account. And now recently he's moved a lot of his content to Medium. But Claudio is always calling it out like it is, calling out his experiences as well as colorism and his identity as a Black Dominican. And who better to have this conversation with Roberto tonight. So guys, I am going to X out and leave this conversation up to you both. So, delen pa'lante.
Cool. Well, thank you. And, good evening to everybody. So, as Angie mentioned, my name is Claudio Cabrera, and I, have the honor of being your host for the night as we explore Roberto Carlos Garcia's work today. First and foremost, I want to thank Dominican Writers as an organization for putting on this event. Second, for giving me the opportunity to interview Roberto, but at the same time, give me an opportunity, as I was talking to Angie earlier, to really learn about his work and how not just important it is, but how great it is at the same time. And it's always great to see a fellow Dominican man or woman really do kind of great in this space. So we have two books that we're going to focus on tonight, right? We're going to focus on a book that Roberto released in 2018 called Black Maybe, Afro-lyric, which is mainly poetry. And then we're going to focus on his latest book called Elegies, poetry as well, which he just recently released in in the previous year, 2020. So the goal for us today really is just to make sure that we have a conversation about the passages in both of Roberto's books, get deep inside the mind of Roberto, and at the same time, within the last 15 to 20 minutes, just open it up to any audience questions that we may have. So we're just going to kind of get into it. But before I get into it, Roberto, anything that you want to say, talk about before we kind of start off into the questions?
Yeah, I just want to echo your sentiments. Thank you so much, Angie, for everything that you do for Dominican writers. I often wonder, like, where would I be without this awesome community? It's fantastic. And I think that it's opened a new door for my work, obviously, and introduced my work to the folks, my people who I want reading it, obviously. And I'm very grateful to you for giving of your time, not just to read the books, but then also to agree with this, because you're writing fire. You know what I'm saying? That everybody needs to get up on as well. And we're going to talk about that as well, I'm sure. But I'm just very, very grateful and very happy to be here.
Awesome. So we're going to start off. I'm going to start reading some of the poems that really kind of stood out to me and really kind of connected with me while reading your books. And the first one that we're going to get into right now, and I'm just going to recite, is called Mama Ana's Flat Nose, right? So it says here, Mama, if we are part Spanish, Gypsy, part Taino Indian, why is your nose flat like Celia Cruz? Why is your hair deep waves like Caribbean Sea? Skin never before seen, cinnamon? Why do I look like Black Chinaman? Mama Pastora was Castilian gypsy, hair yellow, like piss from a rum hangover, eyes blue like gunpowder flashing, skin white like bones in the grave. Papa Africa, Jose Maria, had hair tight as hide stretched over a drum, lips full like the bellies of slave ships, skin black like bones in the grave. My flat nose comes from deep inside them, our skin, nose, and hair, and antenna to both our ancestors beyond the grave. And then at the end, you have a part that says, we are not Black, we are tan, which I'm assuming is Mama Ana speaking back to you. And she says, now cállate, right? So when I read this, it really connected with me just because obviously being Dominican as well, just like yourself, I think sometimes when we have these conversations about Blackness or just, African ancestry in our communities, when you're bringing up facts, it sort of feels like they don't want to hear them and they just kind of want to exit the conversation. So I just kind of wanted to, get deep into your mind on this specific poem and what was the thought process when you were writing it, the experiences that come from it, and I guess how you look at it now.
The poem was really meant to mirror all of our experiences when we come home, at least for Afro-Latinos, many of us, we come home and we want to kind of understand the difference between what we've been told at home. We're not Black, we're tan, somos indio, somos trigueño, somos quemadito, all of that, as opposed to what you're experiencing out in the world, not just from other Latinos, but then other people, be they white, whatever, right? And so one of the things that I would always hear was, we're not Black, we're tan, somos trigueñito, somos indio, castaño, all that shit, right? And so what I wanted to explore also in the poem was how a kind of romantic language, like a beautiful description, can negate Blackness, right? You can really dress it up real pretty, but it's just another way of saying we're not Black. There's no Black here. Black does not exist, right? And one of the things for me that I always found throughout my whole life, and people would always say is to my grandmother, that may she rest in peace, is that she looks like Celia Cruz, And as much as, she loves Celia Cruz music and everything, she was like, yo no me parezco esa mujer, Celia Cruz es demasiado negra, yo no me parezco, you know what I'm saying? So it was always such a kind of like this clash, this paradox, right? Of how we can love the music, love Celia Cruz's music, how we can say negrito lindo, how can we say, esa negra tiene tumbao, or whatever it is, you name it. But yet at the same time, with the same mouth, be negating Blackness and looking at it as this bad thing, right? As a thing that we cannot be. And so another thing I wanted to incorporate in there is the reality also of being Caribbean, of coming from an Afro-Caribbean family where there's so many different types of pools of people in there, right? For example, like my family, you know, the Mama Pastora is our actual like matriarch. We don't know anything beyond her. And she was white as hell, blonde hair, blue eyes, everything. And she married a Haitian man, a really black Haitian man. And they had like, 10 kids, half and half dark, half light skin. There's also this reality that, you can have a light skinned child and a dark skinned child. You know what I mean? Like my sister, may she rest in peace. Ella era blanquita, con el pelo marrón y like more or less medio. And then I was born, and I was like the spitting image almost of my father, not as dark as my father. And that's another thing. People in my family would be like, I prayed you the color que tú eres because tú eras tan negro cuando tú naciste that I was, panicking and shit.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to make sure I incorporated that thread in there also, of how there's this mix, you know what I mean? That you can have a light-skinned sister and brother and still be dark, but you all are related. You all from the same parents. It's just in the family, there's so much also, right? So in some ways, they're not lying, depending on who the person is, I read something that you wrote that there's a lot of light-skinned, curly hair, Afro-Latinos running around claiming the experience of Black Latinos. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so if you take a light-skinned, racially ambiguous Latina or Latino, and someone says, tú no eres negro, that could be very true.
Yeah, absolutely.
They're not black because their skin color is not dark, right? But do they have Afro ancestry? Yes. But that's a different conversation, right?
That's a different conversation, yeah, absolutely.
So I wanted to kind of put that in there too. You know what I mean? Because there's so much shit with the conversation, I think. And so that was kind of my thought process. You always go back home to try to get an answer. And you don't always get an answer. You get a story.
You get a story, yeah. No, absolutely. I think it's interesting too when you talked about, your grandmother and how she related to Celia Cruz or didn't. I'll always remember one situation with my grandmother, my dad's mom. I remember when Barack was running for office and she was praising Barack, but she kept saying Michelle was ugly and Michelle was ugly. Ugly for him, and I knew what it was at that point. And it's so interesting how you have, maybe so many Black women who are Latina, whether they're from Cuba, Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, or Latin, who looked at her and admired her. But then you have those same people who look like her as well, who were really trying to push away, at the same time. So it is fascinating, to kind of see that dynamic just kind of continue, because it does continue, throughout time. And in the interest of time, we'll move on to the next poem called Back to School. And this one really stood out as well, just because I think it touched on Blackness, but also the relationship side when it comes to women at the same point, right? So right here it says, plantains melted, onions and cheese into the small sea of olive oil and salt on my plate and after the meal. After the glass of cold tamarind juice, a nap in the shade, the smell of palm-soaked air, sweet river water baptisms, I dreamt of Brenda Vasquez and her Castilian slants, Jessica Alba's skin, her high school-sized ass in the 5th grade, and I dreamt of going back to school, sharing Dominican slang with her, popola, oficial, coñazo. I didn't want a vacation there at first. Mama Ana warned me, avoid the sun, you are too Black already. But the sun taught me I belonged. It loved me blacker, stronger. I went back to school and saw Brenda Vasquez, walked up to her and she said, ay que negro, tú pareces un puro negro. And my friends on the playground froze, then laughed and repeated, el negro, el negro, el negro. Damn, why did I feel so bad? Why have I been sitting barefoot on this small patch of schoolyard grass ever since? So what I wanted to kind of ask you about is, with your interactions when you started really identifying yourself as Black, or maybe people started identifying you as such, what were your interactions with women like, and how has like your your thought process just changed overall from young Roberto to Roberto now?
It's funny how when you're a kid, you know, shit's really not that complicated, right? Like I would be in school and, you know, most of my friends were black, right? All the girls passing me notes that liked me were black. So to me that, you know, it was just a very easy thing, right? It was what it was. Luckily, things always come full circle. And you just recognize, okay, you know, what the fuck was that back there? Damn, like, you know what I mean? But you always, a phrase we kind of heard all the time was, you know, hay que mejorar la raza.
Yep.
We got to improve the race, meaning we got to get lighter and lighter and lighter. So you're going to marry una rubia con los ojos azules, like a blonde chick with blue eyes, blah, blah, blah. And so I was reading those pieces on like that you wrote about light-skinned women and finding validation in that. And absolutely. You know what I mean? I was about that. I was always trying to go for the most Latina looking chick.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, right? Whatever that means. Which is some bullshit, but. And so, you know, that poem is interesting because of, I was really trying to find a way to pack a lot of experiences into one, right? And kind of understanding some things about childhood and what stays with you, I realized that the best way to convey this message would be to approach it from that perspective, like childhood. And how those instances and moments, they stay with you and they catapult you to bullshit, right? And so I was just really trying to show how that works in a young person's mind, right? There's also the other aspect of being like, I'm making up a word right now, machified, right? Like from the earliest age, you know, I was already being told, you know, ya tú sabes, la mujer, tú vas a ser un tigre, tráeme una mujer bien bonita, like fucking third grade, like, you know what I'm saying? Give me a break, like, un macho, blah, blah, blah. Like I already knew like, you know, who I would like, what I would like, all of that. And so it was also kind of like obsessive in a sense to, as a child, made me prove that. You know what I mean? You know what I'm saying? Like somehow recognize and realize that I did need to be pursuing girls, that I need to come with some game somehow. And, oh, this trip to DR, this is the game, boom, that I'm a kick. You know what I mean? Like already having that idea in my mind at that young of an age was also wild to me. And then how these toxicities came together. The toxicity of colorism and the toxicity of this machismo, right? This shit. So that's like two of the things. But then also how that stays with you. Because that last line, you can be a grown ass man, but inside of you, there's still that kid sitting on that playground with that moment. And that shit is haunting you. Right? And so a friend of mine, we were doing a poetry reading, and when she got up to read, she said, I'm gonna read this poem and it deals with A, B, and C. And she said, I was talking to my therapist, and my therapist told me that you leave certain versions of yourself behind, walls. So she was like, what would your teenage self say to your now self if you walked in? And it was like a shocking ass question because she's like, I don't even know. Like, I know what my 16-year-old self would say. He wouldn't even want to talk to me. He'd be like, this, like, you know what I'm saying? But there's also other selves that are back there, not just 16, 12, 8, 6. That little joker's back there somewhere, still sitting on that patch of grass. And that impacts then the next person that's locked somewhere, the next person, and you're trying to excavate, but also give something for someone else to think about. And I think that what I'm always trying to do in my poems is convey our experience through, you know, my experience or an individual experience. You know, hopefully that answers.
No, absolutely. That makes total sense. The next poem I'll focus on, which to me was really fascinating, was Casta, right? And it just really kind of talks about Spanish heritage as a whole. And, it's fascinating because you use 3 to 4 words in every instance and kind of talk about, and correct me if I'm following this correctly, about how it began, who it started with, kind of how it ended, but the core reason why all of this happened, right? You talk about race mixing between the Spanish and natives not being consensual but forcible, essentially rape, right? Mm-hmm. And the interesting part to me was when you kind of got to the part where you were kind of describing all the different ways that people go about not calling themselves negro or black, right? So it was like trigueño, trigueñito, cimarrón, rojizo, moreno, morenito, quemado, quemadito, prieto, mm-hmm. Indio, indiecito, criol, claro, clarito, blanco, oscuro, oscurito, negro, right? Mm-hmm. So, for me and for you, obviously, growing up, we heard all these things, right? My dad would tell me about how on his ID card it said Indio. It didn't say black, in the Dominican Republic, right? So one of the things that really stood out too is that you don't really have these descriptions for people who are white, right? You don't have these descriptions for people who are light, but you have all these descriptions to kind of run away from blackness. So I just kind of wanted you to kind of talk about that as well. And just, did you ever embrace the words that were non-black, right? Yeah. And when did you get to the point where you started embracing words that were?
So it was like a Jekyll and Hyde thing for a minute, right? Because, my friends in the African-American community really kept me honest about my shit. But, I had like complejos about my hair, like I would get derrizados and shit, S-curls, Jerry curls, I had like it was crazy because my mom didn't even realize what she was doing. She was like, my shit was like, boom, like just a big ass fro. And I didn't even know what I was going to do with it. And I was braiding it in cornrows for a little while. And I was getting derrizados and just having this crazy curly shit. And she was like, ven que te voy a arreglar el pelo. I said, oh, damn. I was like, nah, you know what? My shit is good. It's curly. It's nice. She was like, no, te va a gustar, te va a gustar. All right, boom. She just started straightening that shit. Like an hour later, I looked like fucking DJ Quick. You know what I'm saying? Like my shit was down to here. It was like, I was like, oh shit,
Yeah.
And my boys are like, damn, what happened? Like what? I was like, this shit looks dope, son. I look like DJ Quick. And they're like, nah, you look like a fool. Like, what are you doing? And I got like, that's when I was just like, I got really pissed off. And I remember like I washed it right away, and I think I ended up cutting all my shit off, and then I ended up getting dreadlocks. But it was like a Jekyll and Hyde, you know what I mean? And on one side, I realized and recognized, okay, there's nothing wrong with being black. No tiene nada. Like, I don't understand why everybody freaks the fuck out about this. I was wrestling with that. But then I was also doing shit subconsciously to
escape it.
You know what I'm saying? To escape it. And so when I was thinking about, it really hit me when I was I don't remember where I was, but I was physically looking at the word mulatto. And I was like, that shit looks like a mule. It looks like it means mule, and then I just, little by little, I was doing research. And I was finding that all these names had this taxonomy. It was like an animal taxonomy. And when I saw the Casta painting, that's when the shit was like, it was like a fucking moment. I saw it as a roadmap to move towards whiteness. Yeah. Almost like, right? Like a roadmap to move towards whiteness. And that shit infuriated me because everything started to fall into place once I saw that painting. The fucking applications we fill out every day, right? The HR shit. The nicknames we give each other, the obsession with not being black, where it comes from generation to generation to generation for fucking 600 years. Like, it starts with the idea of casta and the political practice, The artwork came later. The artwork came later, or at least the surviving artwork. It comes from later, but the idea existed, and it wasn't just based on skin color. It was based on your skills and what you knew how to do. Okay, trades, math, science, farming, painting. They put you in a caste system for all of this. And it also continued to demonstrate to me, okay, once I really delved in and was looking at shit like redlining and the experiments done on African Americans and the way white people would just come in and burn down anything that was successful that was African American, the fucking extent that they would go to torture and subjugate African Americans, shit that you wouldn't even, you'd be like, somebody sat around for hours dreaming this shit up. That's when I was like, no wonder we're all fucked up from the Caribbean, right? And a lot of African Americans look at us like, okay, y'all got work to do. Fuck it, go do your work, right? But that also exists in the African American community, so nobody's immune. We're all prisoners of a psychological experiment, is what I call it. It's like a fucking psychological experiment they're doing on us. All this was occupied with, no, yo soy calpo mulato. No, yo soy, jíbaro. No, yo soy, like, you're not a fucking goat. You are not a mule. You are not a wolf. You are not, what the fuck is a tente en el aire? No te entiendo. Like, all of this shit is distraction. All of this shit is like coercion, is manipulation. It's, you know what I mean? It's to produce a kind of self-hatred and just and I get fired up, man, because this is like, you know what I'm saying?
No, I hear you, man.
This is the obstacle that we got. There are other groups, man, where they don't even dream of doing this shit too because of the unity factor. All this shit also creates distance between us. Distance.
Absolutely. And I think, and I think one thing that really stands out too, and I think the Dominican Republic has a very interesting relationship just because, they obviously share the island, right? Yeah. They share the island with Haiti, right? And it's interesting when you meet darker skinned Dominicans, right? Like yourself, like myself, and how many kind of create a distance from Haitian men and Haitian women at the same time, right? Or kind of say because they're Dominican, they're either culturally superior or just superior, right? Or a superior version of Black, right. When that's just not the case, right? So there's that relationship of trying to, it's almost like there's Black Dominicans in the Dominican Republic at the same time that feel like they have the opportunity to say, yeah, I'm Black, but I'm not that Black, right? And they bring it over here as well. And it gets confusing, and it kind of like, moves in a little bit and segues into like one of the next poems that I wanted to read, which was an elegy written for the N-word on behalf of the word nigger by a nigger, right? So fresh off the boat, fresh off the plane, fresh off the islands and the hurricane rains, just got to the city and already saying, my nigga, what's good, my nigga, right? Yeah, man, that's my nigga. I be that nigga. Yeah. Got down with the hustles, got down with the raps, got a pair of Timbs and a Yankees baseball clap, and you slap nigga at the end of all your sentences and don't understand the consequences, right? And we could continue, but I think one of the main things that really stood out about that poem was, one of the fascinating things is that the word nigga with an A at the end is a global word, right? I remember going to Mexico once, Cancun, and someone on the beach saying, yo, what's up, my nigga? And I think I was in Tulum and someone said it to me too. Or they try to talk in a way that they feel is Black in their eyes, right? And what's fascinating about it is, in a pre-pandemic world, when you would get on the train and you would see Dominican kids who obviously just came from DR, who can't barely speak English, one of the words that they say the most is the word nigga. So I just kind of wanted to get into that one. And was there ever a point where you felt weird about saying the word, or was this more a work that was based off you kind of just like observing and saying to yourself, like, this shit don't make sense because you come here and you don't want to identify as Black, you don't want to cohabitate as Black, but you're willing to kind of embody the culture. You even see it kind of in the music with Spanish trap now in a way. It's like dress like hip hop culture, but don't necessarily, you know, embrace what comes with it.
Absolutely. What happened? Here's the principle behind the way everybody behaves around this, right? It's just that Black culture, right? And there are similarities, you know, between North, South America, Central America, and the Caribbean. But African American culture in particular, the West has objectified people of African descent, othered people, indigenous, Asian, to such an extent that they view it as an ATM machine. It's an ATM machine. It's access, right? It can be like a trump card to prove street cred. It can be, it can say, look, I'm hip. It can be, look how much more cultured I am or educated, right? Look how much more civilized I am than these people. It's a catch-all. You can use Black culture for anything, to prove any point. Right? It's like, people don't, like the majority of people don't stop and think about that. They don't stop and think about that, like how they are using an entire people for gain and profit. Right?
Yeah, economic gain, and then run away from it when drama comes.
That's it. That's it. And it's like, the rage comes, for me, like, I'm a big believer in, because of the journey I went on, is that you got to understand your reality. You got to know your reality, like, right? What is your reality? You know, you just came to the US from a different country. You're going to have a lot more opportunities. That's wonderful. But there's shit going on here too. Just like there was where you just came from. What is that shit? I got to keep my eyes peeled. But a lot of people come in here and they step into narratives very easily. Whoosh, this is easy. And they, you know what I'm saying? And that's it. They play dress up, they do whatever, boom, boom, boom. So I used to say that shit all the time. And I never got questioned about it by anybody ever. You know what I mean? Anybody ever. You know, so much so that, you know, I make friends today and they say it to me and shit. And I'm like, you know, I don't say it. I mean, sometimes I'll slip up. I'm not going to lie. I slip up. But it was very different. You know, I tell the story often. I got locked up for doing graffiti on a building with my friends.
Yeah.
And we didn't know it was like a fucking community center, bro, for like kids with cerebral palsy or some shit. Like, damn, it was like, I felt so bad after it, but it was a clean white building. So we just hit that, bam, bam. And the cop, she was real upset about it. She was pissed. And I was being a little dick, you know? And, you know, she looked at me, she grabbed me like this. She was like, you know, it's niggers like you that give other niggers a bad name. Whap, and slapped me in my face. And I was like, that shit hit different. You know what I'm saying? It hit different in that moment. Even in the movies, you can see a movie about, you know, back in the day, slavery, blah, 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 but it hit different in that moment. And ever since then, like, me supo a mierda. It just didn't taste right in my mouth. And I'll, you know, if it slips out, I'll catch myself like, you're getting too comfortable, bro. Relax. But yeah, it's like, you know, wearing a shirt or using an object, Black culture, for a lot of people. And the N-word and anything that Black people create or produce, the world wants to cash in on it and take it and use it and own it and manipulate it and cast it off whenever the fuck they want. You know, so yeah.
No, absolutely, absolutely. And now we're going to move into Elegies. So this was your latest book that you just released in 2020. And before we get into it, just kind of take me through the process of writing this book, this poetry book, how long it took you, and what was kind of the inspiration for it.
So when my grandmother died from complications due to Alzheimer's, it was a lot. It was a lot just because she had Alzheimer's for like 10 years, 10, 11 years. The doctors would always say that it was amazing that she lasted that long because a lot of people don't live that long with Alzheimer's. And, my aunt took stupendous care of her, man, just took such good care of her. And so we had kind of been used to living without her, so to speak, but she was still there physically as a present. If that makes sense?
Yeah, you were able to kind of accept what the end was going to be much earlier than the end, in a sense.
Yes. At least I thought I was.
At least you thought you was, yes.
At least I thought I was.
We've been there. We've all been there.
Yeah, and it's running rampant in the Latino community and in the Afro-diasporic community, right? And so when she did pass away, I just didn't want to forget, man. I didn't want to forget the moments. I didn't want to, I wanted to hang on to her somehow. And so I just started writing poems about her. And then people I know started dying, friends I grew up with, some of my friends, their kids, just tragic fucking losses, tragic, man. One of my students passed away, just a wonderful, wonderful young man. And, I saw him the day before he died. And so all of this just, I just went on writing about it, just trying to write about it to make sense of it, to contain the grief. And writing poems with my friends that I graduated from graduate school with, and it just kind of came together, Some of the poems in there took years and years and years to write. Some of the poems just came, and it just, it's weird. When I wanted to publish my first book, I was so stressed out about how much this and that goes into a book, and a lot of work goes into it, but the brain, the heart and soul and the hand to get that shit out, it comes together and it pushes you to it, and then it's done. And you're just like, what the fuck happened? You know what I mean? Like, oh shit.
Yeah.
And so if I'm proud, is, I don't really like praise and all that shit like that. And, but I'm proud of this book because I'm glad that the memories of those folks and the complexity of my relationship with those folks lives in the pages of the book. Yeah, that's yeah.
Awesome. No, that's amazing, man. As someone who's in the writing process at the moment, to kind of hear that it all comes together at some point or another, it's helpful, because I'm sure you had your moments of, doubt and moments of just like, writer's block, and it happens, and it's very hard, I think, in a day-to-day life to really feel like you can find the time almost to even do it. But you're obviously living proof of that, right? But it's a process, like you said. And one of the first, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Just jump into, for everybody listening that, one of my professors when I was in graduate school, Ross Gay, I remember him saying to me, because I told him, Ross, I got writer's block, man. I don't think I'm gonna be able to do my assignments, this semester. And he said to me, don't look at it as writer's block. Look at it as your brain telling you there's another part of the puzzle you need to be working on that doesn't involve you putting words on a paper right now. Right? And I was like, that's the best news I heard all day. You're muted.
I apologize. It feels like what he was saying was almost something along the lines of like, it's almost like you have to do the internal work before the word comes onto the paper.
That's it. That was going to be the next thing I was about to say. Sometimes that work comes from sitting
inside.
Right, sitting with it or reading, You know what I'm saying? Or anything else. But sometimes you need that, you know? So I just wanted to interject with that.
No, absolutely. No, that was great. So the first one that, and this kind of veers a little off the topic, even though we kind of get back to it about colorism and negritude and stuff like that, is to a young man on his first period, right? And I found it to kind of be humorous because I think every man at some point or another goes through this, whether it's with their significant other, sisters, moms, whatever it may be, right? And it goes, the way my matriarch sat at the table that morning is a panorama in my mind. Tia Nereida sitting cross-legged, pushing back the hair from her forehead and holding the cup in meditation. Mommy cradling un cafecito with one hand, her other arm across her chest, hand resting on her arthritic shoulder, and my big sister, Judy, for whom not enough plátano maduros existed in the world on that morning. And I was welcomed as a hero when I sat down to eat my frosted flakes. Apúrate, papi, pa que vayas a la bodega. A $5 bill pushed at me. Acuérdate, Kotex, okay, Kotex, no tenga pena. At the bodega, I passed a purplish blue package. El bodeguero looked at me long and hard. What's up, macho man? You good, hombre? And older boys walked in and saw and hungered. I know what that is. Open it. Give me one. And there was no way. So a fat, bloody lip, two scraped knees, and a head knot later, I made it home, the package unopened. Judy pinched my chin up to see my lip. Did you get yours in too? Did you fight back? She ran warm water over my lip, and I nodded yes. Bueno, she replied, in this life, we all got to bleed sometime. And I just felt like that was an excellent ending in the way, she just kind of relayed to it, right? And kind of made jest of it. And, essentially, where did this one kind of come from? Because it feels like, it was definitely some sort of personal experience of you having to kind of do that. Because in both of the books that I read, you have a very woman dominant life growing up, it feels. There's many women who are obviously, moms, aunts, sisters, whatever it may be, but they were important in obviously who you are as a man today.
Facts. I grew up in a matriarchy. It was, I was the only male figure in the house. And so, that was both good and bad. Because while they were teaching me all these lessons about, respecting women and this and that, they were also conditioning me to, and I read that piece you wrote about, Dominican women aren't just here to cook for you and clean for you and do all this stuff for you, right? But that's what I thought for a long time. That was my shit. I was like, Mommy, I'm gonna marry a woman just like you, para que me cocine y me haga esto. And she would be like, así mismo, papi, te tiene que cuidar, te tiene que... So there was this, right, that clash, like always. So, that's real. That's real. That and other shit happened. But it's so like what, and it's funny because okay, we're talking about negritude, right? And who we are. And one of Cesare's things is that we are people too. We are
absolutely.
beings.
Absolutely.
You know what I'm saying? Like it's not all about the shit that the Western world, right, or the Eurocentric world wants us to feel all the time. Right? Like we gotta, and so, and it's hard. I gotta remind myself of this, like all the time. You know what I mean? The struggle is real, and I gotta, I'm a soldier in this struggle, right? Me and my man Ed, we talk, and I always say, we're pilgrims in an unholy land and shit, but we're like, we also have a right to be human beings and to experience all these things. And so like, for me today, I gotta go not just for like wifey and my mother and it used to be my mom, but not no more. But for my daughter, like I gotta go for my daughter. You know what I'm saying? Like, damn, I thought I was gonna be free and done, but no, you got daughters, guess what? You're gonna have to go for your daughter. So the world will punish men for that level of understanding and tenderness. It doesn't want us to be that way with the women in our lives. It doesn't want us to be, that type of open. Go get that shit yourself. That's embarrassing. I'm not gonna go do that shit. That's what the world wants. right? But for me, it's all right. You know, I might like make fun, poke fun at my daughter a little bit, whatever, have some fun with her. But that kind of tenderness, it's a gift to be able to do that. When we think about the beauty of the miracle of childbirth, I've been blessed to experience childbirth 3 times. I have 3 children with 10 fingers and toes. When we think about the magic of that, of a woman carrying a baby and delivering a baby and that life coming into the world, menstruation makes that happen. You know what I mean? It's a part of that process. And that discomfort, that pain, that suffering, if you can somehow be a that, if it comes with some pain and some stuff, go take that and fuck it, that's what it is.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. And I think it's interesting, when you really think about the clash between modern Dominican men and old Dominican ideals, right? And how you were kind of talking about, the women in your life will say, te tiene que buscar una mujer que cocina, que, tú sabes, hace esto y lo otro, right? And it's crazy because some of us may not even need that, right? I appreciate that my girlfriend cooks, but I don't need her to cook. Like it's not like something on my checklist in the way that it may be for someone who's the same age as me growing up in Santo Domingo or Santiago, wherever it may be, right? So it's just interesting how like these things are changing, but they're not just changing like with Dominican Americans, but I feel like there's movements to kind of change that type of thinking also in the Dominican Republic as well, as you see more women kind of like push against the idea that they need to be, ridden to a kitchen and to not working and to not getting an education while, they follow the 1950s lifestyle of he brings the money, she just takes care of the kids, right? So,
and that,
that's go ahead.
No, and that Dominican men know how to cook. A lot of Dominican men.
And a lot of them, yeah. My dad knows how to cook. Yeah, my dad, can defend himself. Se defiende, como dicen.
Yeah, I can make it all. Like my grandmother taught me how to cook so much stuff. The only thing that I didn't learn how to make from her were like the habichuela con dulce de leche, right? Arroz con leche, right? I didn't learn to make those things, but I found a way to learn to cook. Like you said, so that I wouldn't need that. Part of my was like, if I'm gonna be with you, it's gonna be because we want to be together, not because I need you to cook and clean for me and you need me to pay bills and things like that. I'm gonna start that cycle, right? When I was reading Dominican Love, right?
Oh, Dominican Love, yeah. That was about my parents, yeah.
I was like, oh man, this was like that. That was what like my moment of awakening was, to stop being that stereotype. Who you talking to? Let me see your phone. Let me see your page. What is this? I don't want you talking to no dudes. Don't let me catch you out here walking. All of that dumb shit. But also there are too many young women and women who think that is love.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying too. So that was part of
question,
that.
And the question may be, are they at fault? Are they at fault?
No, they're just like us, brother. Yeah, they program like us, bro.
They program like us, absolutely.
They program like us.
So kind of still kind of staying on the theme of women, I'm going to touch on Elegy, which is hidden an ode to your beehive updo, right? What does a Caribbean woman free from the shackles of Trujillo and machismo dream upon stepping foot in New York City? In the photo, you are kneeling, one arm across your thigh and the other holding your purse, staring past the cameraman into a future you couldn't possibly know would include me, your oldest daughter's son. Stuck on you, and I don't know the appeal of a beehive updo, except that you look so beautiful, so confident, so like me when I'm wearing new sneakers and starting out in the evening. Mommy, if you only knew there's a pantsuit revolution happening now, but you were rocking pantsuits in the 60s with beehive updos and platform shoes. And as I burn a hole in this crinkly sepia photo, seeking details within details, I wish I could just pick up a phone and ask you to head over to Walmart with me and we could laugh at the fake updos on sale. And I take advantage of the moment to say no one rocked it like you. A different kind of crown for a new freedom, for a new queen. And I thought that was excellent because as we see, old fashion becomes new fashion, right? Mm-hmm. And, you know, one of the things that I touched upon once in my writing that I really kind of related to in this is that a lot of the people that wore these things, a lot of the people that did these things that are sort of being brought back into the spotlight were never really recognized for it. We're never really celebrated for it, right? So it's like, oh, tú sabes, yo hice eso en los 70, los 60, whatever, right? But, you know, they may have the photos of it, but it's not necessarily celebrated. And not that it needs to be celebrated by media, but maybe necessarily celebrated by us. And I felt that was something that you kind of did in this work right here, where you celebrated that person. And you almost told that person like, hey, you were cooler before they were cool, essentially. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, listen, these elegies were also an opportunity for me to say things to my grandmother that I didn't get a chance to say. Because one constant between groups of people who experience oppression or have experienced it, like, you know, she was born in 33, and so she lived throughout that whole Trujillo shit, right? Is a very an intense kind of privacy of not talking about shit, not talking about the past. And because of that, we miss so many opportunities to talk about so much more than we did. You know, I mean, and we talked about a lot of things, but those old pictures is what I didn't necessarily, I didn't get the opportunity to really just sit there with her and be like, what happened on this day? Like, where were you going? Like, what were you doing? You know what I'm saying? Like, and that picture that I'm describing in the photo is one of those moments. And so it was an opportunity in a way to kind of give her the props for that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And no, 100%. And one of the things that I feel is important too, that you did, whether she was present or not, was that they didn't have the opportunity to, like us, to have these types of conversations, to kind of tell their story in a way, right? And specifically Dominican women at a time when, you know, a Dominican woman writing a book probably wasn't the most celebrated thing, or maybe the thing that was the most encouraged at the time, right? So I do really feel like, you know, our parents are kind of taught to repress.
Yes.
Right. They're taught not to really kind of like tell their story. I know sometimes my dad won't tell me stuff. Right. And it's like, you know, I don't pry hard because it may not be something that he wants to talk to me about. But kind of getting a little bit of his story, getting a little bit of my mom's story is important, because then the reality is when you're showing these people to your kids and they're long gone, what do you have to, is all that you want to have to say is that she was great. She was the best mom on earth. She was the best dad on earth. Like, you want to know more. And I think you being able to kind of like really touch on that was important.
Yeah, man. You know, definitely. And it's, you're right about them repressing. They just didn't necessarily, the tool that they had for being able to keep moving forward was to repress. That's what they were taught. And they trusted that, man, and believed it, you know, and still do. And damn, you know, that's trauma, B. That's trauma. That's like, that's so unfair.
It's unfair, yeah.
Unfair, you know?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I guess the last one that we'll touch on, and then we'll open it up to any questions on the channel, is the cost. And specifically number 2, because I also felt like I saw myself in this. And it goes like this. You are 16 and at a pool party. The girls are pretty. The party is a Latino party, but you know the drill. Your own family warns you against dating Black people, yet here you are, the only Black person at the party. Latino, yes, whatever that means, but Black. As the time to enter the pool approaches gradually, less and less friends engage you. You feel like a guest that's not being asked to leave, but you feel like a guest that's no longer wanted. The other kids start getting into the pool. No one is inviting you. No one is acknowledging you. Foolishly, you start speaking to people in Spanish. You are trying to prove something. No one is listening. You are ashamed of your desperation. Deep inside of you, waters are crashing loudly. You leave the party and nobody notices. A few days later at school, nobody asks you how you like the party. They talk about it as if you weren't even there, as if you hadn't been invited. Later, you'll learn about segregation in pools, the one drop rule, the one black toe in the water rule, across todas las Americas. You learn that DNA is a genetic memory, just like water. You learn we paid a price we didn't decide. Now we know the cost. And that really connected with me as well, because growing up in a neighborhood, and I always talk about how Dominicans admire Dominican baseball players who look like us, but can't envision us walking into a bodega speaking Spanish. Right? It's a ridiculous disconnect, right? Like, you can admire David Ortiz, who's darker than probably both of us, but if I walk into a store, you're looking at me weird if I speak Spanish to you. Now, if roles were reversed, David Ortiz would probably go through the same thing, right? But at the same time, I felt what was important was, and I found myself really doing this in the past, is purposely speaking Spanish.
Yes.
To the point, but at core, it was really about feeling accepted.
Yes.
Not about proving a point, but really about feeling accepted. And I just kind of wanted to talk to you about, your experiences, just doing that to kind of fit in, because I think a lot of us have.
One of the chief reasons I will always represent for my African ancestry, and even though this designation is a construction in direct opposition to the construction of whiteness, always represent Black, because the worst feeling in the world is, okay, you home, you with your family, you watching Telemundo, Univision, you talking Spanish, you doing this, blah, 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 the language of the colonizer. We get it, but it's the language your country speaks. It is what it is. You are part of a kind of culture, right? And then you go somewhere and that same culture is there, and this is the culture and you are not accepted as part of that culture. It's like a shock. Wait a minute, what's happening here? Until you put two and two together and you're like, really? Like, you know what I mean? And you are an outsider 4 or 5 times. And this is something that, I think a lot of us got to understand and accept. We're an outsider a bunch of different ways.
Absolutely.
Being from the Afro diaspora, right? On a lot of different levels. And so I have found myself in the situation of talking to someone who does not know English in Spanish, saying, no te preocupes, yo hablo español, and them struggling with English and completely ignoring. The last time it happened to me, we were celebrating a birthday party for one of my teachers, a man I respect very dearly, and the restaurant was separated into two places. So I went to the wrong one across the street, and I walked in and I saw it was empty, and I was like, where's this place in English? And the two people looked at each other and said in Spanish, ¿Qué es lo que él dijo? ¿Qué dijo? And I was like, oh, ¿a dónde está este restaurante? And he was struggling. I said, ¿Tú eres sordo? And he was like, I said, ¿Tú eres sordo o tú eres bruto? He was like, no. I said, yo te estoy hablando a ti en español. ¿Por qué tú no me estás haciendo caso? Like, I just got, what I'm saying? Like, I'm not gonna let that shit slide no more. Fuck it. I said, that's it. That shit, nobody's ever gonna do that shit in front of me, and I'm gonna let it slide. Ever. You know what the fuck you doing. You ain't stupid. So
yeah, it's the whole like go to the restaurant speaking Spanish to someone, they keep speaking to you in English, and it's like you ain't trying to practice your English all of a sudden. Like you just don't believe. You're just looking at me as a color and negating that I could ever speak the same language that you speak.
And Worse for that person, because in my mind, okay, that's his fucking problem. Even though I'm not gonna let him get away with it. But worse for that person, what narrative are they trying to be a part of by doing that to us? Right? What fucking drama, what fucking dreamland are they living in that they trying to do that to us?
So I know Angie is on the line as well, and I know we're a little pressed for time, but I just kind of wanted to open it up to any questions that we may have from the audience. Anything else that you wanted to talk about, Roberto, before we push it to them?
No, man, I just wanted to say thank you very much. And your own writing is, at the same time as it is experiential, you know, and giving in that way, it has a different generosity also, in that it is very uplifting.
Appreciate it, brother.
It is very uplifting, and that's a beautiful combination.
Thank you so much, man. I really appreciate that.
No doubt. No doubt.
Guys, wonderful conversation. We had a lot of interaction in the chat. I don't know if you guys are also following the YouTube chat, but Shirley Vasquez commented, es verdad que ellos nunca hablan con uno de las cosas que pasaron y ahora tenemos tantas preguntas. Right? And that I think that doesn't only pertain to, you know, like our traditions and culture, but our history, our identity, right? Yeah. Which is one of the reasons why we're hosting our Dominican History Book Club, because I myself, born in a DR, came here at 3 years old, but my mother has never, ever spoken to me about DR history. I could never sit down and have a conversation with her. Not even, she won't even open up about her own personal life. And I want to get to know who was my mother before she had 3 kids, right?
Yeah.
My parents, you know, they're, it's just part of that generation to not share those things.
You know, I found out, I was talking to my aunt, and she told me this, you know, a few years ago. And I'm trying to find, like, you know, pictures and information. You know, Johnny Ventura, El Gran Combo, right? And those musicians from that era used to be in our apartment in New York all the time. My grandmother used to cook for them. My mom was una empresaria. She worked with the publicist for Johnny Ventura and El Gran Combo and those guys. And so they were always in our house. You know what I mean? They were like, the family was always going to concerts. And I'm like, what? I fucking love Johnny Ventura and El Gran Combo. How is it you have never told me this shit, right? And so it's, I'm always trying to reach back. Yeah. And we all gotta, like, you know, when you did that, you had that young lady on talking about the genealogy. I went back and with my notebook taking notes. I already visited the website and put in my father's information. And now, you know, I'm like digging in the crates for more information, because the more we know about our history, and then the history about the places we came from, the greater the chances will be that we're gonna form like a Pan-African Avengers and shit and just crash this whole fucking West party. Like
that would be the best thing.
I totally agree. And it's interesting because, like, you know, to kind of piggyback off what you're saying, Roberto, is that, and you as well, Angie, is by finding out their stories, we find the thread. So I really do believe, like, you know, some of the shit your parents do isn't so far off from what you may do. You know, like my dad, for example, was in communications. He was like in radio. So he was in a form of communications and journalism, right? I probably would have never known that extensively, because, you know, a lot of Dominicans like to repress or not really talk about things, right? But it, you know, while I'm not in radio, while I'm not in audio, I'm still in communications. Mm-hmm. So I'm literally an extension of him on that level, right? And I think a lot of times we don't realize, well, we don't realize, and it's part maybe our fault for not investigating enough, and part theirs for not being open enough, right? It's that kind of like,
we have to pry.
Yeah, you have to pry. Oh, I know they're not gonna like my mom to this
And
age.
then they'll be like, ¿por qué tú preguntas tanto?
Yeah, like my mom
saber
to this day
eso?
will not tell me what her age is, right? So I've had to guess her age, and it's like, if you can't tell me what your age is, then you probably ain't gonna tell me shit. You know what I'm saying? So it's like that's kind of like part of it, and I think it's really up to us, specifically as Dominicans, to really kind of just keep prying and prying, but also prying with respect enough to understand that some things may not be worth prying for. You know, there may be some things that are sensitive topics that they may not be really willing to kind of talk about, you know?
I mean, I feel that our parents' generations are also dealing with their own PTSD, right?
Yep.
And they don't know how to handle that. The only way they know how to handle that is by suppressing it. Yes. Because, you know, once you put that away, that's it. You ignore it and you move on to the next thing. There's no reason to bring that up again.
Yeah. Right? And one of the things that, you know, capitalism and that Western system of slavery and exploitation purposely tries to do is to cut those threads that we have to our past. They want to cut our threads to our parents' past, our parents' thread to their grandparents' past, and our grandparents' thread to their great-grandparents' past. Because then we don't know who we are, and they can condition us how they want.
I agree. I totally agree with that. Roberto, you were speaking about going into restaurants and people pretending like you weren't speaking Spanish to them. And it immediately took me back to Claudio's post about the barberos.
The barbershop. Oh my gosh, that post was so dope. Yes.
When Claudio was just like, you know, I keep going to these barbershops and they swear that because I'm a dark person that I don't speak Spanish. And still, when you speak it, it's unbelievable to them. Mind you, la gente de San Pedro de Macorís son del color de Claudio. They probably have family members as dark as Claudio. There's places in the bar with people as dark as Claudio.
Darker, Alfonso Soriano.
Yeah, for them to feel like, no, y también como dijo Claudio, que uno ve los peloteros así mismo, porque la mayoría de los peloteros son de San Francisco de Macorís, son oscuros, right? Y uno, you're watching them, tú sabes que son dominicanos, right? Tú sabes, es más, ellos ni hablan inglés, hablan un inglés machucado porque no lo aprendieron bien. They just know enough to get through the game or get through signing a contract or whatnot. And still, people are in disbelief that because you are dark, there's no way in hell that you could speak Spanish.
Pero tú sabes quién le hacían eso también. You know who used to do that shit too as well? And in some places they do. South and Central Americans that are indigenous, que son indígenas, le hacen la misma vaina. They do the same shit to them. They call them montañeros. They call them indio montañeros and pretend like they're not part of that. Because they're not mestizos, but they're not part of that group. So it's a formula that is being applied to all of us.
Yes, yes. Some of the other comments here were Jean-Paul Infante said, love the talk. Rob, your debut has a prose piece on Melancolia, trying to get at the source, and moments in Elegies get at that Melancolia. Has your understanding of Melancolia changed since then?
No, I still don't know. It's still a mystery, like Duende, like that whole idea of Duende. It's still a mystery, Melancolia. But I know that what has changed is that I don't fight it no more. I just let it do what it does and see where it takes me. You know, that's it. You just kind of got to let it. How is it going to come out? Is it a poem? Is it a story? Is it an essay? You know, what is it? And you just got to ride it. Is it, and you know, it's funny, Claudio, as I was reading your work, because I like to read self-help books a lot.
Huge on them, bro. Huge on them.
Oh, man, they're like...
No, I don't always follow the advice in it.
No, pero, you know, hay que saber.
That's what it is, right?
And what is the word? The integration of your story with elements that will help people find their way, right? You like, that's just what you do. right? So with Melancolia, with this idea of a kind of sadness that teaches you, a kind of sadness that carries you, a kind of sadness that comes and goes, that you don't necessarily understand, that drives you to do shit that's the opposite of what those self-help books is telling you to do sometimes. You just, sometimes you just gotta let it ride and let it be and let it come out how it comes out. And so, that's what I got, JP. Like, that's where I'm at with it,
Yo creo que le faltan 2 libros más, and maybe by then la melancolía ya la tiene.
I hope not.
Let's see. Wanda Hernandez commenting that this is a whole conversation. Armando, this is a beautiful experience to be part of. A lot of people snapping their fingers on the Pan-African Avengers.
That's what we need. I'm telling you, it's crazy.
Armando says, what our parents may not share comes out in our children.
Yeah, man. Yeah, it stays in the DNA. There's a New York Times article, funnily enough, about DNA and the transmission of experiences in the DNA. And how they believe that, this shit tripped me out. They believe that, you can alter it, right? So like our parents had crazy ass experiences. That shit's in their DNA. They come here, their experience changes, a little bit of what they went through, and this new experiences comes to us. But there's a deeper hidden history in that DNA that we don't even know about. Yeah. That we are then going to pass on, or because we have those similar threads, like you were saying, Claudio, we will find ourselves in a position that they found themselves in. You know what I mean? And then that shit goes right to our kids. So it's like,
and because they're not sharing, we can't avoid it.
No.
Right?
Right.
So Brenda said that mami me dijo hoy, mi hija tienes que olvidar.
Yeah. See, that's a whole fucking philosophy, bro. That's una filosofía que hay ahí.
Julissa Dilone says, preach, if your history is erased, we will be assimilated into the dominant culture's definition of our identity.
That's it. Perfect. Damn, she said it perfect.
Regina states, time moves on until the world has tipped for the good and your children will be such an accepted part of the community that the wounds you suffered will not recur for your children, God willing. And Armando says, what you're talking about reminds me of Los Cobradores that call Haitian writers Moreno as they board the guagua.
Mm-hmm. And what I would say too that I think is important about like having these conversations, Roberto and Angie, is that, I think every day due to social media, and we already know this just kind of being embedded in the work, we find out about countries in like Latin America where the population is majority indigenous or mestizo that have really, really small pockets, like in Mexico, of Black Mexicans, right? Mm-hmm. And I think what social media has allowed for, and I think also conversations such as these ones, however many people they reach, is that it gives people a voice, but at the same time, it also highlights the fact that, we exist everywhere, right? We just don't exist in the Caribbean, or Brazil, right? Mm-hmm. But there's many of us in Peru, there's many of us in Ecuador, there's many of us in Colombia, right? And I feel now we're in a space where, the plight, but also at the same time, the beauty of the Afro-Latino experience is being met. Because I think sometimes we, I find this in your writing as well, Roberto, that the goal isn't just to tell the story and sting you, but the goal is to also tell the story and say, this is where I am now, or this is, how I sort of got past it in a sense,
Yeah, and here's where there was some beauty in it as well, because there's like a post, I don't know, it gets shared a lot, but in which it says, they want to hear our Black pain and trauma, but they don't want to hear the part that was beautiful, right? It's something like that. I'm paraphrasing, and there's sometimes where I don't want to show that, but there's a lot of times where I do want to convey that, that there is moments of tenderness and beauty and within that.
I agree. But people are so, well, white folks are so used to pain and suffering that they think that that's all we have to offer.
So they Garcia.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry.
Right. If anyone has any comments, please post it on the chat. We want to be able to answer your questions. Take advantage of the fact that you have Claudio here. Ask him about his Instagram writings. Come on, guys. Ask him about his book. When his book is coming out.
It's all about the right.
No lo jodan.
Let's put him on the spot. Where's your book?
You should share the links to the books if you can.
Yes. Well, we share Roberto's books all the time.
Yeah, Angie showed me so much love. Thank you so much.
we share that all the time, but your publisher is Flower Press, is it?
Flower Song.
Flower Song.
McAllen, Texas. Yeah.
You know better than I, the link. Go ahead. Share it, Roberto. What's the link to the book?
I got you. Ya ahora mismo lo voy a hacer. If you just, as a matter of fact, I'm gonna put my website because if you
I'm gonna put all this information on the YouTube video, but I want you to say it out loud for people.
Okay, so my website is robertocarlosgarcia.com, and there, if you go to books, you'll see there's a link to get the books, and it'll take you right to the publisher. I know Amazon is convenient, but the publishers are people that have believed in my work. So it's nice if you can support them directly.
Yes, please support the publishers by purchasing the book via their website. And if you love the book, if you like the book, I urge you all to please review the books. Please.
Yeah.
I have spent this week emailing people who I know have been purchasing our books. I know many of our audience members are purchasing books because we recommend them, but you guys are not leaving reviews. And it would be really helpful if you do, so that our books could be more visible.
Yeah, go to Goodreads and
can see that books like Roberto need to continue to be published. That Claudio's book needs to be published.
Vamos a hablar, Claudio. Vamos a hablar. Claudio's gonna get that dope ass deal. Watch.
God willing, I keep telling him to go for it.
Yeah, he's gonna get that dope ass deal. It's gonna be so legit.
Manifesto.
Bueno, parece que la gente no tiene más preguntas. They're just thanking you for this conversation. And clapping. So we're grateful for everyone who joined us on the chat for this conversation. If you want to know more about Roberto Garcia, follow him on his Instagram account. What's your Instagram, Roberto? I keep forgetting. Roberto Be Like.
Roberto Be Like.
That's his Instagram, and Claudio's is Claudio E. Cabrera. You can also find Claudio on Medium, where he's transferring the majority of his writings. And Wanda Hernandez said that she got your copy, and she can't wait to dig in, Roberto.
That's awesome.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
And Armando said we should do like GameStop and invest into all the small presses 800% to increase the stocks.
That's a good one.
If you know how to do that shit, hit me up. Trust me, we can do that. I know a lot of people.
Armando is a fellow poet as well.
Vaya.
So yeah. So he knows. Él sabe cuál es el meneo.
Ten pendiente, because we're gonna do a workshop. I'm almost done writing it out, Angie. I know, Angie, you had told me you wanted us to do a workshop.
Yeah. I'll be patient with you. So right.
And before
I'm patient with quality. I'm patient because I know I'm gonna get something good from Roberto.
Thank you.
Casey says to the moon, Claudio, I'm rooting for you when you drop your book. And in these beauty, Roberto's IG is Roberto Be Like.
Yes, thank you.
And Angie, I just wanted to say, Roberto, thank you for the opportunity. Like I was telling Angie, I think you're the first, not Juno Diaz, not Acevedo, not Alvarez, anybody. You're the first Dominican author that I've read. And this was exceptional. This was great as well. I'm gonna buy them because you sent them to me for free.
Don't worry about it, man. That's
I'm gonna support you. Sure. But I want you to continue being a voice, a light, and your experiences, being put into written form is a gift, right? And continue blessing us with such. And I really, really appreciate you, brother.
Thanks. Likewise, man.
Thank you, Claudio, for accepting our invitation. We knew that these were the perfect books for you to start reading.
Absolutely.
That we knew. Definitely knew that. Brenda Torres says, I root for everyone Dominican. Julissa is currently, you gained 1 follower, Roberto.
Oh, yeah, I just saw that. I saw that.
I hope everybody else is also following Roberto, and not only Julissa. So don't play yourselves, people. Follow Roberto, purchase his books, support Dominican writers, review our books.
So the last thing, just to support what Angie's saying, the last thing, right? Okay, Juno Diaz, Elizabeth Acevedo, Angie Cruz, ¿quién más?
Nelly Rosario.
You just had un cafecito, Julia Alvarez. Right? These are like our lights, right? They're up there. Everybody kind of knows who they are and they're at. To get more voices to break through, you do gotta leave those reviews so that they notice that there's different levels to this, right? Because those folks are representing us well. They're doing beautiful written work. They're out there, right? But then to demonstrate that there's other levels and layers, you gotta just do a little bit of the work to because the more of us are lifted up, we all lifted up, right? So that's all. That's all. Yeah. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you so much, man.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate
everybody. Have a good night. Thank you so much.
Take good care.
Right.